The Civil War, up to now, has been no more than a small conflict. But even during times of small conflict, the law must be amended. On the 27th of April, President Lincoln suspends habeas corpus. It will not be reinstated until 1866. This will allow him to arrest people he deems to be working against America during the Civil War. He will get massive criticism for this throughout his presidency. Also on the 27th, Lincoln expanded the blockade of southern ports to North Carolina and Virginia. Remember, North Carolina is still an American state when this extension is passed. Now, here's a good time for me to talk about the blockades suggested by Lieutenant General Winfield Scott, the commander of U.S. forces. The Anaconda Plan gets its name from the idea that they would strangle Confederacy to death, much like an anaconda does to people and animals. This would be done by using the Navy to make sure no ships leave, taking over islands off the coasts and riverways, sending an army of 6,000 men of the regulars, which would be aided with up until 60,000 more newish recruits, using gunboats down the Mississippi River. By taking over the riverways, ports, and important trading sites such as New Orleans, the war could be won. They would cut off trade from the Confederacy, which would be damaging to them because the Confederacy, while being made up of a lot of farms and plantations, those were cash crops and not really there to produce food, along with taking away the ability to wage war, because if I might remind you, they only have one actual arms plant, and it's in Virginia. They would be out-equipped and starving to fight against them. Now, but why such a cautious plan? First, Scott had only a limited amount of regulars with this 75,000, being untrained, ill-equipped, and untrustworthy, at least to him. Also, the lack of blood would make it easier for the southern states to be more easily reconciled. As he put it, envelope the insurgent states, bring them to terms with less bloodshed. While this does sound pretty good, there's one problem: morale. The American politicians and president want a long drawn-out war, and they could easily win it, so why wait? They have the Confederacy cornered. Scott knew this and wrote as such to the subordinate of his, McClellan, another name that will be more important later. He says, the greatest obstacle in the way of this plan, the impatience of our patriotic and loyal friends. Scott is correct, and his plan will be dropped, but mostly in name. This blockade, along with fighting down the Mississippi River, will be done. So maybe his idea was correct after all. Unfortunately, there seems to be nothing else for me to talk about, so bye. Wait. While this might mean I have nothing very much to say, that's not necessarily true. Even when nothing major is happening, there's still much to say. So let's talk about uniforms and logistics, even briefly. First, logistics. The arming, resupplying, and reinforcing of armed forces. This will be the first railroad war. As the name implies, trains and railroads will be very important. The Union have a much better railroad system, being more industrialized than the Confederacy. There are quite a few railroads in the South, and they are quite fragile. Bigger problem, railroads were mostly not part of a system. They would just start and stop at random towns. The importance of the railroad is not lost on historians, with some saying the work had been shortened by years, if not for Southern raiders on the railroads. The naval logistics was even harder for the Confederacy. The blockade cut off major movement of supplies from Europe. The Mississippi Port River network was soon to have numerous Union boat patrols stopping any sort of relief. They would also have to start one from scratch. The Union Navy, despite being undersupplied and unmanned, would have a much easier time supplying forcing armies, allowing for a certain general to go behind the enemy lines on the peninsula of Virginia. The Confederacy had to, as I said earlier, start one from scratch, putting them distinctly behind. How about production? Another thing of Confederate disadvantage. First, uniforms. The North had many textile factories. Despite early problems, to be able to find a uniform design that could be mass-produced at amazing speeds. The Confederacy, while having the famous rebel gray uniforms, were in reality very diverse in designs, because the supply and outfitting a soldier was a responsibility held by the individual states. In fact, after victories, uniforms from the Union side were taken and wore by the Confederacy. And that's all I have time for this week. Next week, please join me as I talk about how the war actually continued. See you then.